Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I will be presenting my September TBR. Or if you watch Brian Lee Durfee, or not TBR. Okay, that's done. So I have several books from several genres. I have not done the statistics yet, but I'm excited to talk about them. And I do have several different genres represented. Some of them are sequel books. I think all of them are sequel books, except for one. There's one standalone original novel. Everything else is just about sequel books because I have so many series that I'm working on. So why don't I jump right into it? The first book is The Oracle Year by Charles Soule. I recently read Charles Soule's novel, not recently, like more than a year ago, a year and a half ago. Wow. Anyway, I recently read his book, Light of the Jedi, which was a superb beginning to the High Republic. The High Republic's had some bumpy moments, I will admit, but the adult novels have not been that. The adult novels have been pretty good, particularly Charles Soule's kickoff, Light of the Jedi. And so I loved it. I also really enjoyed, I don't read much comics, but I read some of his comics and enjoyed them. He just has the style that I find interesting. And I saw this at a used bookstore and I was interested in it. And I read the write-up and I was like, ooh, that even sounds more interesting. It seems very much like a soft sci-fi type novel. So I picked it up and it's been sitting on my shelves for about 6 or 7 months. And I was like, you know what? It's time to read it. So I'm going to be reading it. It is, from what I can understand, there's this character who starts beginning to predict the future. And so that person, or rather, not to predict it, but like actually sees it. And so this character starts utilizing it in different ways. I haven't gone further because I don't want to get spoilers. So I'm interested in reading this book, The Oracle Year. And then he has one other book called Anyone that he wrote that I'm also really interested in reading. I also have on my slate this month the second Hunger Games novel, Catching Fire. This is the second of 3 books, and I read the first book this month, and I put a review out just recently, and it was wonderful. I absolutely loved reading it, and I also had a good time. I watched the movies first. I know that's heresy in the book culture, but I explain it in my review of The Hunger Games. But I still love the novel, so I'm like, I'll read this one. And I actually thought the films got progressively better, so I'm actually really interested in seeing if the books feel that way too. So I'm really excited about this one. This should be a fairly quick read. I also have, I'll talk about 2 books together, the book Rough Beasts of Empire and Paths of Disharmony. I have read the first 2 books of the Typhon Pact series. The first book being Zero Sum Game, and the second book being, I can't remember the title of it. The second book, which will be here, the first book I just finished, and the second book, as this video is being recorded, I'm like just about to start it. And so in September, that's August. In September, I'm going to read books 3 and 4, and I really like this era. I really like these types of ongoing series that Star Trek does. I didn't particularly care for the first one, but we'll see how I feel about the second book in this series. And I've read some books by this author. This one is written by David R. George III, and this is a controversial book of his, I'm told. And I've absolutely loved one of his books, and absolutely did not love the other one that I read. So I'm interested in seeing how I feel about this one. And this one, David, is Dayton Ward. Dayton Ward has written so many mediocre books. He has written one book that I thought was brilliant. I thought it was poignant. I thought it was groundbreaking. And then everything else of his I thought was really mediocre. So I'm interested to see if this one aligns with one or the other. This one is a big plot book, so I'm interested in seeing if it builds the plot in this one. So that's the 2 books that I'll be of Star Trek that I'll read, and I have one more Star Trek book that I'll talk about in a second. My next book on my list, book 5, is John Grisham's A Time for Mercy. I read several months ago, at the request of a friend, A Time to Kill, and absolutely loved it. One of my favorite books of the year. And then just a few months ago, I read the book Sycamore Row, also by John Grisham, a sequel. It's another book in this series, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant, just as good as A Time to Kill in similar yet different ways. Check out my reviews for them if you want my more full thoughts there. And I bought this when I bought the first two, and so I'm interested in reading it. I have not heard anything about this one yet, really. I've avoided all reviews and spoilers, so I'm interested in reading it. I read the write-up. It seems a very similar novel to A Time to Kill, so I'll be interested to see how he plays this, and this was written way after A Time to Kill. So this is the legal thriller on my list this month. The next book I have is The Ashes of Worlds, the seventh and final novel in the saga of the Seven Sons. This has been a long journey on the channel. I've been doing this since about January. I have really enjoyed reading through. It's not the most amazing series out there, but it's super entertaining, and I'm very invested in it. And I've read the first 6 books. As I record this, I literally just finished the 6th book the other night, and I absolutely really enjoy Kevin's writing style, his plotting. I think his plotting is some of the best in the business, as is some of his world building, believe it or not. I think he gets credit for his plotting, but he does not get credit for his world building, and it's really good. And so I'm really excited to see how it ends. Book 6 had a good ending and leaves me wanting more. Please be a good ending. Please be a good ending. I've read his other endings, and his other endings for some of his other series are pretty good. So this will be the next book on my list. And then I have a sequel book, Prophecy. This is the second book in the Symphony of Ages. The first book was Rhapsody. Rhapsody, according to the reviews I've read, is a very controversial book. There's a lot of people that love it, and there's a lot of people that hate it. And as I'm recording this, the video for Rhapsody has not yet released, so I don't know what my audience thinks of it. But I can just tell you that I loved Rhapsody for so many reasons. I loved Rhapsody. I thought it was a great book, and I have I have a full video for it on the channel. And I was just like, I had several other potential fantasy novels that I could read. I was like, I need to do one fantasy novel. And I had several others on the list. And after reading Rhapsody, I bumped them all off the list, and I said, take a seat, everyone. Prophecy is going to be my second book, and I'm really interested to see if it can keep up the hype that book 1 had for me. The final book on my list today of my TBR, and I might change this a little bit, I might read more, I might read less, but I probably will read about this amount. The final book on my list is an unreleased book that I don't have a copy of, but I'll put on the screen, is Star Trek Picard Second Self by Una McCormick. And I'm going to get a little bit ranty in this section of the video, so I apologize about this, but I feel very frustrated because Star Trek has not had a novel release since December. You could point to the fact that Simon & Schuster published an audio drama in, I believe it was April, but I do not count that because I couldn't read it. You could listen to it, you couldn't read it. And so they have not published a novel, a print novel, since December. As far back as I can remember, with the exception of the year 2018, Star Trek has produced novels almost every month since Star Trek came out. Since really the 80s, I would say. It came out in the 60s, and there were little itty-bitty books, but Star Trek's always had books like every month or almost every month, constantly. And they've slowed down for some reason, despite the fact that there's 5 TV shows. If you have 5 shows, there's no excuse not to have novels coming out right now. And for some reason, they just aren't focused on it. And I am really enjoying the novels, and I read 2 of the 3 currently released Picard novels, and I loved both of them. I thought they were both superb, even though I didn't like the show. So I've been waiting and waiting on this book. This book was originally slated for like an April or May release, and then they pushed it back to September. And then the other books in the Star Trek slate that were announced also got pushed back. And I asked an author friend of mine why this happened, and the excuse that they used was printing issues. And I believe that this author thinks that it's printing issues, and was probably told that too. But my issue with this is that we've known for a while that this book was coming out, and yet they couldn't explain, they couldn't track down the paper for it. The Star Trek Picard novels have been, or at least the first one by Una McCormick, also by Una McCormick, sold very well. And Star Trek novels in general sell a good minimum. They know exactly what they're going to sell. They've been selling hundreds of them, 700, almost 800 now. So they know what they're going to sell, and yet it hasn't released yet. And it's just super frustrating to me because it seems like logical. If you're going to announce a book, you've already lined up the paper, you've lined up everything, and yes, sometimes shortages happen. But to move it from like May to September or April to September means that they weren't really prepared for it. And to move the whole slate like that, it seems like you're treating your media tie-in fiction like it's not as important as everything else. And maybe it doesn't sell as well as everything else, but that entire brand is based on fandoms. And when you keep kicking it down the can down the road, oh, we'll give you your books eventually. Oh, we'll give you your books eventually. Eventually the fans are just going to stop reading. And so it'll be even worse for the brand when the books do come out and nobody wants to read them because they've already given up hope on waiting for them. That's at least my take on the situation. Maybe this waiting will have Star Trek fans satiated, waiting so long for the book that they'll go out in droves and it'll become a New York Times bestseller and it'll rejuvenate the franchise. But I highly doubt it. I don't think that's going to be the case. Not with a Picard novel. Maybe with something else, but not with this novel. So those are my... Sorry for... I had to do a rant. I had to get that off my chest. I'm very frustrated. But I'm excited to read the book. That's probably my most anticipated book of September. So I will read it on release day. But this is my TBR for the month of September. I might read more, I might read less, I might read exactly this amount, who knows. But if you are watching, please let me know what your TBR for September is. And have you read any of these books in my TBR? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.